I've seen videos of us shooting rockets up into storms, and lightning comes down along the cable. You know, a rocket that's connected to a cable.
Yeah, the Ben Franklin experiment times 1,000. Yes. Continuing the Electric Views April 3rd show, we talk about weather manipulation and the harnessing of power from the atmosphere, as well how that atmosphere affects incoming bolides here and on other bodies.
Yeah, so we still don't have the mechanism or the means to capture all of that energy from one lightning bolt. I think this is where we're getting into. If we had the means to capture the energy from one lightning bolt, we would be able to power our cities with just storms.
Yep. I mean, look at how Stargate Atlantis saved itself in the Season 1, Episode 10 episode. You know, the lightning was hitting the city and they put the shield up. Just talking sci-fi crap. Don't worry about me.
Yeah, so, I mean, why isn't... I don't hear anybody trying to move towards that. That seems like the most real applicable science for alternative energy to me. I mean, shooting a rocket up, getting a capacitor big enough, storing the energy from one storm enough to power a city. Done.
Yeah,
and then putting it...
A balloon. A balloon and a tether.
Yeah, a balloon and a tether. Yeah, because they
think that they would... Yeah.
Well,
I would think they would have done it.
I'm going to tell you something. This is something that they did in South America, where they want to get a place to have more rain, so they put up a grid and then increase the voltage across these wires to make it rain more, and it does. And the Russians did that for them, and they got paid $20 million to do it, but. Wow. But of course, it's because they work on a different ball game than us. You know, they're not playing they're playing with what I would consider more real science in air quotes.
Yeah, but this weather. Too bad Ito's not on today because he talks quite a bit about it. But
yes,
weather manipulation.
Yeah,
from my different input points, they've been doing this for quite a period of time.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
All of the Olympics. Every time the Olympics happen anywhere, they seed the clouds for weeks to make sure that there's no rain during the Olympics.
That's just silver nitrate. We know that. We know how that works. But that's a chemical thing. I was more thinking of some of the electrical. Well, there's more to it than that even because when you talk about trying to harness lightning strikes, you could use grids, but we're forgetting the one big thing, and this is so hard for me, and Andy tried to attack this problem, but what it really comes down to is if you have a for example, a lightning bolt, well, to break down that much atmosphere and to create a discharge pathway, that's a lot of charge. Well, the voltage between these points is much higher than 500,000 volts, and that's the ionospheric voltage. So, what's building up these voltages? And the thermopile effect came to mind and stuff like that, but which makes supercell storms and so forth. But that's still something we haven't really answered yet. Like this is
where did the name thermopile come from?
It's an electrical principle where you, like the Peltier effect, you basically can move heat and make it go to certain places electrically, which is very interesting. It's a direct link between heat and electricity, not just thermally, but I mean literally. I'm taking heat from I'll make it cold over there by using electricity and pulling the heat over there. And that principle is used on new coolers for computers and so forth.
I would say the use of voltage in order to increase rainfall is a combination of both electrical and chemical effects. Like they're using the electricity to recombine all the free hydrogen and water vapor in the atmosphere back into a water state.
There's some evidence for that. I mean, hail, for example, just the fact that hail exists. It's pulled together and crushed into balls. That's usually a pinch effect current situation, but it's ice. Very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been in Texas when it's hit. It's just amazing. Honestly,
obviously, you never saw my trip. I thought I was going to die. I pulled into an abandoned building and drove my car into there for shelter, and it was the most horrifying thing. I literally became religious for like 20 minutes because I had to turn my car facing towards the storm into a ditch, and then it was hitting so hard I thought it was going to break the whole. I mean, I assumed my car was trashed. Like, that's how hard it was hitting. Yeah. And it was never ending. And it was like, I mean, and I feel good that I lived through it, because seeing all the car crashes and the trucks that went off the roads and the trees that were thrown down, and this was just driving down the highway. I mean, there were 17 or more transport trucks off the road. Right. And some of them clearly were trying to keep driving when they should not have, and they just went right off the road, like as if they could no longer see the road. And I'm confident that was the problem, because I couldn't see 2 feet from the car, and I was just seeing lightning going everywhere, like crazy lightning. I got like the amount of power that I was seeing was just daylight for seconds at a time. Again, it was so bright.
Right. Wow.
Anyway, never experienced crap like that before. I've had hailstorms, but never in my life did I see something like that. And that was nothing, as some people would say. So,
I've actually experienced quite an amazing electrical phenomenon myself on a couple occasions. One of the first occasions is it was snowing in the winter, and I was with my girlfriend Emily, and we looked outside. We saw flashes. We're like, "What the heck?" And then all of a sudden, the flashes started changing colors. Through all of the different colors, they were pink, transitioning into green, blues, oranges, and this happened 3 or 4 times. And we immediately went on Facebook and started telling people about it, and Googling it and researching it, and apparently this is a real phenomena that we were able to lucky enough to witness. And I forget the name of what it is, but it's the light going through all of the spectrum being refracted through the clouds.
Noctilucent clouds.
Oh no, dude! It was not a noctilucent cloud.
Oh well, that's just some guessing.
Right. It was. First off, it's rare enough to have a lightning discharge or lightning storm in the snow. And then for us to see that type of light and it transitioning into many different colors, it was a very. I continued to remain holy for 20 minutes.
Well, it's funny that we brought that up, because this harkens back to the whole, mythology, when we were trying to, like, as much as I love driving through this valley in California and seeing these 7 very slow, weak dust devils, but they were, several kilometers high, and it was so dry, and I had a feeling this is why it was happening. You're just watching this dust come up, and There's 7 dust, like within range of my eyeballs. I'm looking around, and I'm freaked out. But, no one else was. The people are in the fields and they were like, yeah, whatever. They're just big dust devils. They can't hurt you. But I mean, these could turn into tornadoes, can't they? But clearly it's like watching tornadoes in slow motion. I've seen it happen in snow too. But obviously dry snow. But the story I'm reminded of is someone, and it was a poet. I don't know who it was. It was probably like some Canadian feller. I don't sure, but anyway, he was going across he was witnessing the Northern Lights, above north of 60, and he said, how could one look at these and not find them to be spiritual? There's something about that. And it makes me reflect on mythology and, of course, how amazing those events must have been to be drilled into your head, like the basics of everything. And what is left over, like more modern things they talk about. When I went to Iceland, they talked about how the volcanic rocks would occasionally have sprites and elves that would dance across them, either reds and blues and greens. And then I'm reminded of the will-o'-wisp from Scandinavia, which it appears to be something like ball lightning, and they would kill them using cold iron. So you'd have to hit it with an iron bar to destroy them. And imagine how persistent it must have been then. It was a thing that you encountered in the woods regularly. That would be kind of weird, So much so that they had a way of killing them, like that. It makes you wonder these other stories about, what was going on in the past. Clearly, pre-Rome, I'm talking. Because the leftovers in Rome were sort of. They were talking about stories that had occurred earlier, is what I mean.
They say these two things. There's like the blue ionization, and then there's this noble gas involved in the fringe. So just as far as people have studied to do, I've looked at this obviously recently, but it's like that noble gas is always, there's an interest of what's going on with that.
Well, the cool thing about noble gases is that they don't get affected by electricity that much. They're inert.
But they light up.
Well, that's what we use for neon, yeah.
Yeah.
Like fluorescent tubes, that's all it is using a noble gas, something, because if you use a conductive gas, something, it will corrode, it will turn into other gases, and you're going to get a non-stable light.
Right.
So
that's this interesting thing where it's like right on this brings back into like what Buddy was bringing up with this video that he was sharing, but it's right on the as far as Walter Russell's model, right? But it's right on the axis, on the 0 point of the axis, all those noble gases, and why do they light up so nicely?
Just 1 second. There's a bunch of smoke in the air I'm looking at, so I'm just going to see if the house is on fire. I'll be right back.
That sounds like a Paul Napoli effect, perhaps.
Why is there smoke everywhere?
So, hopefully Beale's house is not on fire. Hey, Peter, you said you had something to share. Could you possibly share that? That would be great. Yeah.
I've finished a page today about the craters, because we had a discussion a few times about the double craters and the straight line in between the double craters.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Great.
I'll share my screen.
Can I eat something that won't kill me?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, great.
Yep.
Okay, so for those who don't know, this is where we had a discussion about these type of craters. The odd thing about this double crater is the straight line in between, because if it is formed by a physical impact of objects, then it's impossible to get that straight line. And even if you think it's pure coincidence, I'll go. There are many more of such craters. There are more such images.
Wow.
And here you even see a triple one.
Yeah.
So that this one pretty much proves that it's not a coincidence. Both of these have a straight line in between. So the walls are completely straight. If there was an impact here or here, then it's very unlikely that you get a straight line. But if it's a common explosion, a normal explosion like we would expect, then it's also not possible to get a straight line. So this crater is more or less what we would expect from two craters impacted on the same position. You can see that this impact happened before this impact, and maybe they happened many years in between, a distance in many years. And this is what we would expect, but these are probably formed simultaneously. But there must be something, some kind of phenomenon going on here that explains the straight line. So on my website I have many different. I describe many different vortices, but both vortices don't necessarily need to be rotational. I use the word vortex for every kind of movement in fluids like gas, solids, and liquids. All kinds of movements that have a recognizable shape. And yeah, a lot of them are spiral-like, are vortices, but many shapes are not. There are many movements that are spherical. There's several types of that are spherical, and I call them orbs. And a spherical explosion, which can also be an orb, is what we see, for example, in some nuclear detonations. Those are the nuclear detonations that are very intense. Then you can see a spherical explosion, a plasma ball. At common conventional explosions, it's very rare to see that spherical that sphere. It is possible, but it has to be very intense. So it's more common at some nuclear detonations. It could be what caused those something close to what caused those craters, but this kind of orb, as I may call it, this kind of non-rotational vortex, cannot be the correct one. It's a plasma ball, so it's very intense. You say, oh, it could be the one, but these are actually hollow. You know, an explosion creates a mushroom cloud. Nuclear explosions create a mushroom cloud, and there are mushroom clouds at the center here. At the center of the sphere is a mushroom cloud, and here is a mushroom cloud. But from the edge of the sphere towards the center where the mushroom cloud is, there is no fire. This is literally a hollow sphere. You can see that in the way that they are formed. If you look at many videos of the explosion, this is a hollow sphere. So the most intense fire heat is actually at the edge here of the sphere, and then you go inward. There's no fire until you're at the mushroom cloud. Then there's fire. So and these never form a crater really. So nuclear detonations can create a crater, but they're not as well defined as those moon craters or craters we see on other planets. The crater, if you just detonate a nuclear bomb on the ground surface, then what it creates is a gradual slope more. At the center there's more of a big hole, but you don't get the same kind of crater as sheer Mars with the steep walls, which should be far from the center. So this is probably not what formed the craters on planets, but it's something close to that. It might be. If you look at this meteor, this Russian meteor, comes down, you see, it almost becomes like a sphere. See?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It should.
It's an orb. It's a spherical vortex type. It's a plasma ball.
Yes. That's what I meant.
And if you simply just look at a welding tool, the kind of light, not necessarily the shape. Well, here it's also quite round, but if you just look at the color, the vividness, the intensity of the light, this type of light is very similar to what we see here in this video in intensity.
Yes, it is generated the same way.
If you make a normal explosion with TNT or something, you don't get this kind of intensity. So it's more closer. It suggests that it's closer to something being electrical, by like lightning. Because lightning is more intense than like a normal thermal explosion. And also the heat that you can reach with the lightning is also much higher. So you have to find an explanation as to why you can something that can actually cut away a whole part of the terrain and create that meteor. But even a nuclear detonation doesn't quite do that. Well, at the very center. Okay, so orbs are spherical vortex types, and orbs shows kind of similar behaviors. A soap bubble can also be considered a spherical vortex type, an orb, and they show the same kind of behaviors. Some of this, although they're very different than the plasma ball created by Welder, they do show some similarities. And that's the way that they connect to each other. If you see these two soap bubbles, you see the wall that connects them is a flat wall. It creates a straight line if you look at it from the side. And that straight line would be here if it's on the surface, and that would explain the straight line in between the two crater holes. This is this is not a vortex type that creates those two crater holes, but it's a vortex type that shows similarities because it's also an orb. You can look at the comparison of different orb types, so then you can find these patterns. So this would explain the straight line in between. That's the only way I can explain it. Because also, if you look at the nuclear detonations, those explosions, the sphere which you saw on those two images, the big ball of fire, it doesn't expand or contract. Even though there is a shock wave, even though a lot of heat radiates outward, even though you have the mushroom cloud at the center, that dome that forms, it doesn't expand or contract. It stays there for a couple of seconds and then disappears again. And because it doesn't expand or contract, just for a moment it stays there, it can explain the straight line. Because if there will be an expansion with a shock wave outward that created that shape, if that was the only thing that created the shapes of those craters, then you never get this perfect line. You get a chaotic line. So here we see something else. Oh, the double ring craters. This is another type of crater found in different astronomical bodies. This was all these different types of craters were also pointed out by Electric Universe website.
Yeah, bullseye craters.
look, these craters have two rings, here a ring and an outer ring and an inner ring. Well, it is sometimes suggested that it's another impact which happened maybe almost at the same time, or maybe a long distance in between. But here you see two of them with exactly the same kind of impact at the center. So the odds of that this happens twice, hitting the exact center, is very low probability. This also strongly suggests that it's not coincidence, but there's something else going on. And if you look further for other craters on the different astronomical bodies, for planets and moons, you find more of these craters with double rings. And well, if you look at the similarities, you look at what I just tried to suggest, it might have been formed by an orb. Then you just look at other types of orbs which are pointed out on my website. One of them is a halo. Well, sometimes you have a double halo, and there you see that same two spheres inside of each other. I know that a halo is not considered to be a sphere. It's considered to be a ring or one or two rings. But I'm very much convinced, or I'm completely convinced that a halo is actually formed by a sphere. There really is a sphere there that breaks the light. If the sun is behind that sphere, which is just a huge spherical vortex, then it breaks the light and you see these rings. Because when it hits light at almost it's almost zero degrees, because here only at the side, then the light is broken and goes inward, and then you get these rings. But this was just one explosion, but because it was a double orb, it created this shape instead of just one crater. That's the most likely scenario, I think.
It's an explosion, but what's now? It's. I mean, I really like this presentation. So thanks, people. Very good. And then it opens up the questions of what was the explosion? What was the cause of the explosion?
Okay, and here the last phenomenon that's found with craters that I want to point out to is a crater change. Sometimes it happens that you see this pattern, different craters in one row, like a perfect row, and it's quite odd how these are formed. The first theory that people came up with was, it's just formed by a meteor that has broken up. But if the meteor breaks up like this, and breaks into smaller pieces that go at a different angle, so they move apart from each other. Right. Then the shape of the ground is not a straight line. What you get is an oval shape. If here's the ground and this hits the ground, these pieces, they spread out over an oval shaped area, not a straight line. Now, if the pieces break apart and they stay close together and they all continue in exactly the same direction, well, then you also don't get that straight line.
Right. But you do with electrical phenomena.
Yeah, now the connection with the electrical phenomenon, that's a good one. Then you have to look at this video. If the entire, my theory is that the entire line is just formed by one meteor, and it didn't break up. It just did. It just bounced.
What?
That's what I think. But what you see, it's not
lightning in the lab.
Let me clarify this. It's not the meteor that bounced. It's the sphere, the ball of plasma around the meteor that bounced. The meteor never hit. At the first hit, the meteor itself never hit the ground. Just the ball of plasma around the meteor, which has a much larger radius than the fragment or piece of meteor itself, that hit the ground. Then it bounced a couple of times.
Actually, we talked about this earlier. In my presentation, I described to you the amount of power in one of those called balls of fire. But it's exactly the same thing as what you're talking about. They're a coma around the object because it's coming in at it's coming in with a different potential. So all of the electrons in the atmosphere are attracted to it. And this creates a coma around the object. And this coma is a double layer. It's much bigger than the object itself. And you're right. And obviously, these stresses can only be maintained for so long before the thing blows to pieces, which is what we're seeing in this when it shatters these incoming bolides or asteroids. Some of these things, though, like crater chains, we can see them on the ocean floor. We were just looking at them the other day, I think. Because... Go ahead.
I know it's already been suggested by Electric Universe and Thunderbolt project that craters are electrical.
At least some, for sure.
But this is just new information that's added to it. So this is a slightly different suggestions, but
that's right.
But a lot of the same things that I suggest, and it's just new information that's added to it.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Peter. That's great.
There's a good chance that it's created by electrical phenomena.
Well, that whole canyon right there was probably. Look at that, just scalloped away.
I see that, the creation of ball lightning in the lab there. That's pretty fascinating. It's like, I wonder if you could just extend that one more phase and do it onto, where it's, you have some kind of charged plate with some material that maps similarly to, what something we wanted to simulate or emulate, like that. Well, so that situation, except do it onto some type of ground simulation.
See if you could sustain it.
Yeah.
Well, if it is a pinch that's caused by like a lightning bolt or something, and this pinch is allowed to continue, and it's self-perpetuating itself, like it's basically it has enough power that it's generating that it can sustain its life, so to speak, for a certain period of time. What imparted this power, how to get there, is it causing fusion? There's so many very interesting possibilities there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you know this guy, Peter?
No, it's just a follow-up.
Yeah. Right. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, the thing that's like calling me is like is how do you create it? How do you create something that's going to demonstrate this to a large audience? It's like get more and more confirmation. It seems like that line that the future never happens all at the same time. It happens in certain pockets and then it spreads out. But it's like I think it's happened to us. Now it's like now we're like the purveyors of spreading it out. So somehow that landed on our laps. But I'm excited about it, obviously. But if we could simulate some of these things, and put it into a show, and we can get Buddy as the ringmaster.
There you go.